So this is my third meditation on the life and work of Breece Pancake, and in it I am going to talk about his use of echo taps in The Honored Dead, one of 12 stories in that singular book published in 1983, 4 years after his death. The Honored Dead is Pancake's attempt to grapple with the legacy of the Vietnam War, which for any writer who came of age during that time, as Pancake did, had to be reckoned with like a grim rite of passage. So what is echo taps? That's when two buglers, separated by distance, in the story it's actually opposite hillsides, alternate playing the song's beginning and end with a kind of echo effect. It works for any ceremony requiring solemnity, save for funerals in which the Army suggests that only one bugle should be played. By the way, in homage to this story, I am out here at dawn, walking down the middle of the road, just like the narrator when the story opens, who jokes about his wife's habit of counting the pats at your own risk lines. Eastbound tramples westbound 2617, Pancake showing that his gift for metaphor extends even to football. As you can see on this road, there's simply a double yellow line, so there's nothing to count. Eastbound ties westbound 00. If you're not familiar with The Honored Dead, it is about two high school friends, one of whom enlists in the Navy during Vietnam, hoping to ride out the war stateside, and ends up being killed in action. And if you've ever watched that movie, The Deer Hunter, and cried at the end when they sing God Bless America, or stood before that wall in Washington and tried to fathom the sacrifice etched in every one of those 57,000 names, this story, a mere 12 pages long, packs those same emotions into a short sitting you can do in your own home. But why echo taps? Why that one thread in a story that has several threads, this one barely a paragraph long? The answer is rather involved and personal, and cannot be given its proper due without first describing the unusual effect these stories had on me when I first read them back in 1984, and what they prompted me to do, which looking back seems almost impossible to believe. In short, I was so intrigued by the pancake phenomenon that I resolved to move to West Virginia and live there for the sole purpose of seeing firsthand whether the stories rang as true in real life as they did on the page. Had Pancake written fiction, or simply just changed the names? I was 23 years old and determined to find out. So I am walking up a rather nondescript side street of Princeton, New Jersey, and by that I mean it has not one, but two parking garages, demonstrating that the Ivy League is, at heart, just a very expensive place to leave your car. It also happens to be where I first learned in 1984, when I was 20 years old, that there was a deceased writer with the odd name of Pancake, whose slim volume of stories was attracting a very wide readership. Now, there is no bookstore or library on this street, nor was there either in 1984. Exactly how I discovered Breece Pancake in such an obscure corner of town is a story that can wait, but one which I am eager to tell. But right now, the subject is echo taps. And without ranging too far afield, I'm going to describe the first astounding twist to my Pancake Odyssey that foretells several others, much, much later, like an echo that reverberates across decades. And it regards my move to West Virginia and the improbable fact that without any journalistic experience or any connections whatsoever, I was able to land a job as a reporter on a newspaper a mere 18 miles as the Mud River flows south of Pancake's hometown of Milton. Milton on the Mud, as the locals called it. Even Shakespeare would find that funny. And now to Pancake's story, The Honored Dead. I am walking through the heart of Princeton University's campus, its second most iconic building right behind me, Blair Tower, gateway to Princeton, a route I have chosen deliberately to showcase Princeton's own honored dead, specifically those related to World War I. People who visit this campus and admire the English Gothic style of architecture, which is Princeton's signature look, miss a very important fact, that these buildings were erected right after World War I, and memorials to the graduates who both served and died in the war are embedded in the stonework. In fact, just down this walkway, in a tiny courtyard, engraved over a wooden door of arched medieval aspect, is a tribute to Major John Baird Atwood, Princeton class of 1905, who, on only his third day at the front in the Argonne Forest, stormed a German machine gun nest and took a bullet right to the face, adding his name to the roll of 151 Princetonians who paid the ultimate price in what F. Scott Fitzgerald would later refer to as that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. The Honored Dead. Written around the time Pancake first enrolled in the University of Virginia's Master of Fine Arts program in 1976, The Honored Dead was a story he chose to read 3 years later, in the spring of 1979, shortly before his death, at the Methodist Student Center in Charlottesville, a building that still retains the solid brick-built sobriety of the 1960s. At the reading, Pancake chose to dedicate the occasion not to the dead, but in his own words, consider this reading thanks to the living, specifically to the one who chanced I could write. This one is for John. And by John, he meant his friend and mentor, the writer John Casey, who died in 2025 at the age of 86. I'm going to read a short paragraph from the story in which Pancake describes echo taps being played on Decoration Day, which is the original name for Memorial Day and was still commonly used in the 1960s. And then I'm going to tell a personal story about my own experience with echo taps, very much in the same vein as the strange coincidences that preceded my move to West Virginia, as if something more than just chance was at work, quietly arranging events in a very particular order. But first, from The Honored Dead. It was years ago on Decoration Day, and my father and several other men wore their jackets, and I was in the band. We marched through town to the cemetery in the rain, and I watched the men move sure and stiff with each command, and the timing between volleys was on the nose. The echoes rang 4 times above the clatter of their bolt weapons. The rain smelled from the tang of their fire, the wet wool of our uniforms. There was a pause, and the band director coughed. I stepped up to play, a little off tempo, and another kid across the hills answered my taps. I finished first, snapped my bugle back. When the last tone seeped through the mist, it beat at me, and I could swear I heard the stumps of Eddie's arms beating the coffin lid for us to stop. That passage is vintage Pancake, as if his echo taps was more than just between 2 hillsides, but between Normandy and Saigon. So here's my personal encounter with echo taps. In the winter of 2016, my wife suggested we vacation in Gettysburg in June for 4 days, ample time to tour the battlefield and share its lessons of heroism and sacrifice with our 10-year-old son. I was not only game, but positively enthusiastic. I had been YouTubing for 3 years by then, and saw the 4-day time frame as a perfect window to do something creative, to take my video camera, document the experience, and put it on my channel. I decided to spend the 3 months leading up to the trip putting the whole Battle of Gettysburg, all 3 days, into verse, and then once on site, film my son, toy musket in hand, reenacting each stage of the battle. And as for my son, he was about to learn that the phrase family vacation had acquired an unexpected second meaning, unpaid child actor. And he was a trooper. While not entirely buying into my vision, he indulged it without complaint. I had him jumping into streams, riding on horseback, running through wheat fields, strumming Dixie on his guitar, and pretending he was marching to his doom as part of Pickett's brigade. The whole battle I had him pressed into service as an army of one. The final cut is 9 minutes long, and I will include the link in the description. So here's where Echo Taps comes in. I needed an opening scene to set the stage of what was about to follow. All 3 days of the battle rendered in verse and reenacted by my son. And it's at this point the coincidences I've alluded to start to accumulate. Never mind that Pancake's title, The Honored Dead, is taken from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. That is a minor detail and merely the first loose thread in a much stranger tapestry. For in planning my opening scene, I had at my disposal the fact that my son played the trumpet at school, and that Christmas, my mother-in-law had gifted him with an heirloom bugle that for years had stood in front of her fireplace as a decoration. It was a gift so touching, I had to record its unboxing on video, and here it is.
Wow, that's authentic.
Should I play it?
Yeah.
If you can, yes, you can.
Put it up to your lips and see what happens.
Go by the tree, so.
No, right here. I'm videotaping.
Try.
You gotta spit. Wow. Wow, that is impressive.
And I really don't know exactly how old it is, but I know it's old.
So I had a bugler in the family. It was only natural that I would choose to open my video with my son playing taps on that old bugle. A simple, dignified prelude that would strike just the right note in terms of solemnity. But there was a catch. Taps has 24 notes in total, and one is a high G that no matter how much my son rehearsed, he could only occasionally hit with the clear ringing tone I needed for my recording. I dreaded his frustration that under pressure with the cameras rolling, he would not be able to hit that note. So I gave him an out. Fortunately for both of us, Gettysburg has a summer-long tradition called 100 Nights of Taps, where every night promptly at 7 p.m. some citizen bugler would stand in front of the Soldiers' National Monument and serenade the sunset with those 24 immortal notes. I told my son that he could try to hit the G, but if he couldn't do it, I would just record the bugler at 100 Nights of Taps and splice the two performances together. So here is how my son's first take went. We would try 2 more times and he would not be able to hit that note. I fell back on plan B and that night filmed 100 Nights of Taps, which, in concert with my son's playing, made my own version of Echo Taps when I wasn't even familiar with the term, having only recently discovered it in the last few years. Nor did I make any connection to the Pancake story as I hadn't read it in a long time. The whole scenario, as I said before, was purely providential, turning failure, my son not hitting that note, into something richer than success itself. Echo Taps at Gettysburg, from sunup at the southern end of the battlefield to sundown 3 miles away, a span of both time and place. So here is the complete version of the opening from a film I called Gettysburg, A Visit in Verse.